So this is, we do a lot of bum steers on the show. This is a golden calf. I just keep needing to look into the meaning of golden calf. It's just a phrase I've heard, and it might mean something bad. But anyway, this is a stone cold lock. A book you definitely need to read is The Mismeasure of Man by Stephen Jay Gould. Came out in either the late 70s or early 80s. A response to Charles Murray, who's literally started as like a CIA counterintelligence guy in Southeast Asia. Charles Murray's Bell Curve, a response to the Bell Curve. And so we have first, what's prompting this is Ben Shapiro has taken up the soft Charles Murray mantle. We'll kind of see the way he's like finessing it a little bit, but they can't resist this IQ stuff, which we know is a very limited metric.
It's bogus, frankly.
Yeah, right. Like it basically measures how well you are at following instructions. And I was looking at like Mensa, somebody on Mensa filling whatnot, an IQ test, and it's all like it's geometry like puzzles, like for like first graders and stuff like that. Like the idea that that would define who should run society is an insanely almost like a fundamentalist type of view, like a technocratic fundamentalism that's very, I think, weird in people who aren't like oligarchs that are using it to like justify.
Not only is it short-sighted, not only is it racist, it's fundamentally like an undemocratic way to look at the world and at other people. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the science is bogus. The motivations are anti-human and racist, and then what people want to do with it is extremely anti-democratic. Right. So it's a bad force on all of those measures.
Yeah. So before we get to Gould, let's play this Ben Shapiro clip.
Yes, we got a little Ben here.
He has a very high IQ. And trust me, I'm a gifted kid because I was doing YouTube at age 12.
And it's going to work out this time. Here we go.
So the California guidelines could overhaul the way many school districts approach math instruction. The draft rejected the idea of naturally gifted children, recommended against shifting certain students into accelerated courses in middle school, and tried to promote high-level math courses that could serve as alternatives to calculus, like data science or statistics. Okay, so first of all, if you reject the idea of naturally gifted children, it's because you're an idiot. Some kids are gifted, period, end of story. Some kids have higher IQs than others. And shock of shocks, it turns out that there's a heavy, heavy genetic component to that. That if both parents are neuroscientists, there's a good shot that their kid is going to have a higher IQ than somebody, both of whose parents are on welfare. Okay, that is just I'm not saying that's inevitably true. There are many smart people who are on welfare, I'm sure. They're not all that many stupid neuroscientists, but I'm sure smart people on welfare. But if you have to take the average person and all you know about them is child of two neuroscientists versus child of two people on welfare in a free American society, and all you have to go on is that, whose kid do you think is going to have the higher IQ? Okay, so to pretend that doesn't exist in real life is stupid. It's just dumb. It's like saying that two tall parents are not likely to have a height-gifted child. How could we possibly say that some people are more height-gifted than others? To pretend that intelligence isn't inborn at all, and we are all sort of tabula rasa, is silly. It's just not true by any available metric. Okay, but this is what California wanted to teach. They recommended against shifting students into accelerated courses, and because they want to punish skill sets. They want to defeat the skillsocracy. The last thing you want to do is reward people who are gifted, who, by the way, should use their gift on behalf of society in a free market society. Free markets allow people to distribute the uses of their gifts widely. This is the magic of free markets.
Yep.
So, Ben, you could trot little Ben out in defense of King George himself, right? The kind of idea that there's holy blood, great blood, and, great parents that sort of put people in a certain position is dropping even kind of what we're going to get to in a second with Gould and are the wonders of modern science. This is not even frankly a unique argument. This is a very old, actually pro-monarchy, pro-entrenched power argument. I just want to say right quick on the point about gifted programs, right? He keeps on bringing up this neuroscientist, example. And the reality with that is what is much more important, frankly, than people's, education achievement is the fact that is a part of society that makes good money. And I think that actually reflects much more about what the gifted and talented programs were about, it was not about, oh, we need to select people with the best aptitude. It was wealthy people being against the idea of public education and wanting their children to be sort of pulled out of the classroom with the, with the rabble, with the rest of us, so that they could get kind of specialized learning, to help them advance even more, right? I mean, like the idea that, I don't know. I mean, from everything that we've seen and all the studies that have been done on like these gifted programs, they don't seem like they do much in terms of
Well, I was just gonna say, like, when I see like gifted kids, it's like this caused me actually some kind of alienation from my cohort of classmates. And if there was half as much, like, if that was about trans people, like Ben Shapiro would be testifying in front of Congress about how this needs to be stopped, right? Like that's basically the message out of that. And the other thing is like, just to go off on a few things. You get your 23andMe results back. It's not going to tell you, hey, you're genetically a neuroscientist, right? Right. That's not genetics. There's not a math gene either. And here's the little truth: if you want to find a predictive metric that will basically predict like people's attainment and success in life, it's not IQ. It's called zip code. Zip code absolutely way more predictive than any of the caliper metrics that these folks have in this new data science world, where now we can actually see this stuff and look, this person is genetically just a mathematician. That's silly. And,
access to resources, access to schools that you don't have to walk through metal detectors in the morning. I mean, it's just like it's a completely I don't know. It's just an amazing kind of argument that this is just solely, or like genetics is like the one factor when it comes to human intelligence. Again, something that is extremely difficult to measure in and of itself.
Again, because genetics aren't changing and IQ scores continue rising.
Using IQ scores to get people in the gifted classes either.
Right. No, exactly. That's true. But just to say the ridiculousness of IQ, right? The IQ scores across any population, regardless of if you join it by race or whatever, right, have been going up for ages. There's a difference that is environmentally determined. And Flynn, I can't remember what his first name is, but he's the guy who coined the term the Flynn effect, which is describing, hey, it looks like people's IQs just go up, up, and up, regardless, right? Himself says it may be the case that, for instance, like Charles Murray's favorite target, black people, are and this probably isn't the case, right? There's probably genetically, in science, you take the null hypothesis unless you have reason to believe otherwise. So it's probably the case that there's not a big genetic component differentiating, say, Asian people and white people and black people, right? But Flynn says, like, it could be, for all we know, and where the science is now, and this is people who care about IQ, and which I don't give a fuck about it, right? But this is just even like the IQ folks, right? That even like Sam Harris will supposedly defer to sometimes, even though he won't in, I think, significant areas. But we're not going to get into Sam Harris right now. But they say that any of these gaps that like Ben Shapiro's fixating on in attainment very easily it could be and probably are entirely environmental and not some sort of genetic thing based on race, which is, again, like, race is a very like, we're genetically the same. Race is a political project more than it is a actual biological reality. But anyway, let's play we got the expert here.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal clip.
Why do you think American society is so obsessed with IQ?
I don't know that we're obsessed by it, but I think it arises largely in the context of the lamentable history of our racism. I don't know that it's as much an issue in more homogeneous societies, but we have a situation based on the legacy of racism and continued oppression of people of African descent in this country that has led, for social reasons, to poor average performance of blacks on these tests. That doesn't tell you why it happens, but in a basically racist climate in a country with a strong racist history, I suppose it's not surprising that particularly conservative social thinkers would try to relate poor performance of blacks to intrinsic biological limits. As I like to put it, the quick critique of the bell curve is that it's based upon 4 assumptions, all of which have to be true. If any one of them is false, the whole argument collapses. First, there has to be a meaningful single number that can be given to intelligence. I think that's false. Secondly, you have to be able to rank people in a single linear order upon it, and that order has to then correlate with social attributes, whether you go to prison or not, whether you have children out of wedlock, etc., your income. Thirdly, that number has to be highly heritable. And fourthly, it has to be unchangeable, or effectively unchangeable. A lot of people confuse the third and the fourth. They assume that if something's heritable, it means it's unchangeable, but that's false. Suppose the first 3 were true, and they're not. I mean, suppose there was a legitimate number, and you could rank people, and it was highly hereditary. It still could be very mutable. For example, the obvious example is I may have an inherited defective vision, which is 100% inherited, and I go to the drugstore and I buy a pair of eyeglasses and my vision is fine. I mean, it could be, all those things could be true about intelligence, but the equivalent of buying the pair of eyeglasses, namely programs of remedial education, might boost IQ, and then the whole argument would collapse.
Yeah. I mean, GOAT. He's one of the greatest of all time. The Mismeasure of Man, it's available in audiobook form. It's a great listen. And it's going to be increasingly relevant, honestly. Like, this stuff is very... It's just simply a necessity for hierarchies. This is hierarchy maintenance.